Nintendo is regularly a decade behind the rest of the gaming industry. They made Splatoon, one of the best ever multiplayer shooters long after the multiplayer shooter trend first hit, and only recently perfected the modern open world game with Breath of the Wild. They didn't fuss with 1080p resolution until the release of the Wii U in 2012, and that's 7 full years after the rest of the console market. They still use cartridges, for God's sake. That doesn't mean they're trailing behind the competition, more like they're standing behind a meat shield. Nintendo lets other companies test new ideas and take the critical and financial blows that come with innovation. Then they autopsy the results to achieve the same product, but better and cheaper. After all, being on the cutting edge is a great way to bleed. Based on this theory, we can extrapolate what Nintendo's next decade will look like by looking back at last decade's biggest trends. Starting with the datification of the video game industry, which began in the early 2010s and was fully completed in 2018 when Kratos ascended to fatherhood. Which means now's the perfect time for Nintendo to get in on the trend, with Mario becoming a dad. Mazel tov! Based on how datified games treat motherhood, we'll probably never know who gave birth to Mario's children, because why would that person matter? Based on how the internet is, the mother is probably Mario in Super Crown mode. Either way, this will usher in a new generation of beloved characters and mark a shift in Mario's design as well. Grittier, wiser, a little gray at the temple, and a little less likely to make that jump. Could you do a grizzled old man voice?
It's me, Mario.
Mario Jr. and, presumably, his cousin Luigi Jr. will debut in a new Yoshi's Island game, usurping baby Mario's place on Yoshi's back and in our hearts. And on the other side of the cuteness spectrum, we have Souls-likes. From Software's Demon Souls and Dark Souls ushered in the rise of a new genre meant for people who were tired of feeling competent. The Soulsian games were third-person RPGs known for their punishing difficulty, epic boss fights, and incongruously elaborate headwear. Bayonetta is the obvious franchise for Nintendo to jump in with because aesthetically, it's basically already Baroque Souls, a dark, atmospheric spectacle with a focus on boss fights and sex appeal, just like Dark Souls. But Nintendo doesn't own Bayonetta, so instead, they're gonna reboot Punch-Out!, but without the exclamation point so that you know it's a serious franchise, like when I remove all the exclamation points from my professional emails. The core mechanic will still be boss fights with a heavy emphasis on blocking and dodging, but the reboot will incorporate RPG elements so you can build a strength or magic-based boxer. Rest in the locker room between fights with the bosses, and when you defeat enemies, you'll learn souls. Human souls. On the hardware front, VR has gotten better and cheaper than ever before, enough to become a real viable consumer product. Nintendo previously flirted with VR with the Labo headset in 2018, so it shouldn't be too much longer before they fully commit to a true VR headset accessory for the Switch. Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey both got the VR treatment for the Labo's release, but Nintendo will want to boost hype with a new game. And I wish I could predict that new game would be Fatal Frame, because I want a new game in that franchise, but I don't get what I want. Obviously, it has to be a Kirby game, because who better to express 3 full dimensions than that slack-jawed beanbag pillow? And to really capture the bodacious experience of that cosmic chungus, you won't be playing as Kirby, but against Kirby, fighting to prevent yourself from being sucked face first into the black hole of his gullet. You'll play as Waddle Dee, a low-level enemy who changes powers by changing accessories, and who is, incidentally, my Kirby World OC. I've been refining this 3D render of Dee for months now, and she's perfect. And you can have her for free, Nintendo. Relatively late in the decade, we saw the arrival of Battle Royale games, so we probably won't see a Nintendo Battle Royale for a while. Perhaps it will line up with the rumored, but not yet scheduled, release of a certain bounty hunter game. That's right, where are we dropping, Samus? It's Battle Metro Royale, baby! This game will differentiate itself from other Royales by basically being a competitive speedrunning game. You race to gather objects that unlock new areas, all the while combating the 99 other players. Do you think this is like an actually kind of like a good idea for a game?
I mean, I'd buy it.
Oh, all right. And last of all, Gone Home, Dear Esther, and Firewatch gave us a new way of experiencing games, but there was a lot of backlash against these so-called walking sims. People complained that these weren't real games, which is absurd and is also the kind of controversy Nintendo loves to avoid. But now that all the hubbub has died down, Nintendo can finally get in on the action with Ground Fox, an introspective first-person game heavy on exploration with light puzzle elements. Your old friend Peppy Hair has gone missing planetside, and in order to find him, you're gonna have to do a barrel stroll. Hacha! Regardless of when Nintendo takes up these trends, and they will, they're gonna do a great job because that's just what Nintendo does. What trends from the past decade would you guys like to see Nintendo pick up? Honestly, I would love to see a first-person hallway horror Luigi's Mansion game. Reboot Luigi's Mansion as a serious franchise, Nintendo, and if you don't, you're cowards. The internet told me to call you that. Puns will save you. Okay.